Okay, again, we're on page 50. This is the second graph. You can see I've changed the equation that's in your notes on page 50, and I am going to be using for this graph the particular value of 1 cos 2 theta minus pi over 2. And this one has a horizontal shift. So what changes from left to right if I'm talking axes here? The y-axis. In the first one I had a vertical shift, so I pretended my x-axis moved. In this one I have a horizontal shift, so I pretended my y-axis moved. But the same parameters are going to be true this time that were true last time, and that is going to be, I'm going to start by labeling my original, my real, the actual x-axis, 3 boxes pi over 2, 3 boxes pi, 3 boxes 3 pi over 2, and 3 boxes 2 pi. I'm also going to find a way to mark off or identify the width, the domain, or the section of graph I should be graphing. And then I'm going to start. Now this one's still going to have a midline of y equals 0, so I really don't need to say that because it's not got a vertical shift. What's shifting in this one is the y-axis, which is known as an x equals line, and it's going to shift by this much. Remember, for a horizontal shift, negative means go right, and I want to go right pi over 2 or 3 boxes. So I'm going to draw in a fake y-axis at pi over 2, and I'm going to name it with an x equals equation. Every line I draw should have a graph name. So a horizontal shift will be a y equals, an x equals, and a vertical shift will be a y equals. And now I'm going to pretend for this graph, for all intents and purposes, that this is my origin. It's where my pretend y-axis hits my real x-axis, and everything else for this graph will be the same. Again, can't highlight enough, it's really important that you label the original x-axis before you start shifting things around, and that you label the domain that you're supposed to be graphing before you draw in that new axis. Now you're just going to start regularly. The amplitude for this one is a 1. The frequency is still just the number in front of theta, so it's a 2. The period for this one is 2 pi over 2, or pi. And the interval for this one is that period divided by 4, so box and a half. My pattern for a cosine graph that is positive is a high 0, low 0, high. And I'm going to be starting this graph high at a height of 1 on the y-axis. And I got a lot of space here, so can we make every box be a half? No, I can't. Otherwise it won't go down. Yeah, stop that. Just do that. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start high on the fake y-axis. I went up 1 unit on the fake y-axis. I'm going to go right box and a half, hit 0. Right box and a half, go low. Right box and a half, hit 0. Right box and a half, go high. Right box and a half, back to 0. Right box and a half, go low. Now I'm done. I hit the right hand end point. So I'll connect what I've got there. And then as I look at my boundaries, my big green highlighted domain, I realize that I'm missing a chunk. Do you recognize why I am missing a chunk? There's a great big chunk of graph right over here that is missing. Why is that missing? Because of the shift. Because I moved my y-axis and I started at the pretend y-axis and moved right. So now I have to do what we call a blast block backfilling. And we always backfill, like start at the far right of the graph and speak it backwards when we have to go left of the y-axis. Whether that y-axis is the real one or the pretend one, we always backfill. So now I'm going to read this thing backwards, literally calling this low, then 0, high, 0, low, 0, high. The next point that I should be plotting will be box and a half to the left and back to 0, then box and a half to the left and back to my low point. This will be my final graph, and it is correct. Kind of looks like a negative coast graph. If I had taken this section and put it over here, there's the positive coast graph. It looks negative just because of the horizontal shift, but it really is the correct graph. You can check it on your graphic. We okay with that one? Okay, one more time, moving on to this last. Okay, again, I've labeled first my domain from negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi. Next, I'm going to highlight or mark off the domain that I should be graphing. It's a pretty wide domain. And then I'm going to draw in my fake axes. This time I've got 2 of them. So I'm going to draw in a horizontal axis or a fake x-axis at negative 3. I'm going to label it both here and over here where it says midline. And then I'm going to draw in a fake y-axis. Anybody want to speculate where my fake y-axis is going? From the real y-axis, I should move pi over 6, which is in which direction? To the right, 1 pi over 6. So my fake y-axis will go right there. I'll name that x is equal to pi over 6. Okay, now everything else I do is going to be exactly the same. I'm just going to be working off this as my origin instead of this. Does everybody see that? This is my old origin. I don't want it. I want this one. So I'm now going to have an amplitude of 2. Do I write negative 2? Does anybody write that on their quiz? My frequency is still the number in front of theta. And I put a 1 there so you can see that number a little bit more clearly. The number in front of theta is 1/2. That makes my period 4 pi and kind of explains why I'm doing such a big width. How wide is that width? 4 pi. So I should see one full graph here. And my interval is just going to be a pi. So I'm going to start at this origin. And I'm doing a sine graph. So I'm going to start at that origin. From there, I'm going to go low. 0, low, 0, high, 0. So I'm going to go write 6 boxes. Now, it's real important that you count 6 boxes and not use this. Because remember, this was labeled from here. And I'm not working from there anymore. So pi is 6 boxes. I'm going to go write 6 boxes and hit my low point, which is down 2. I'm going to go write 6 boxes and hit my x-axis again. That's kind of off the grid, but I'm still going to draw it there because it gives me sort of a aim at that point. But I'm going to stop at the yellow line. So they see how I did that. I didn't actually hit that point. I drew it, and I'm going to keep it there. As long as I don't ever touch it, it's okay. And now I'm going to backfill. This was 0, low, 0. Where should I be going next? High. So I'm going to go backwards 6 boxes and go high. Backwards 6 boxes back to 0. And then from there, I think I can just figure it out. And that ends up being my graph.